Hey, hello everyone. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, Finland, with my friend Aaron. And we're here to test Wi-Fi HaLow 802.11AH with the new European frequency and power limits. So it kind of smells like manure here because it's planting season. So I'm going to go inside and tell you about it. So I traveled out to the farmlands of Finland to test the latest chipsets from Morse Micro for the 802.11AH HaLow Wi-Fi standard. Now, unlike most of the new Wi-Fi standards that focus on moving to higher and higher frequencies for higher and higher bandwidth, but at the sacrifice of lower and lower range, HaLow does the opposite. By operating in the low frequency 800 and 900 megahertz bands, it promises theoretical ranges of up to 5 kilometers at bandwidth of around 20 to 40 megabits per second. So not the screaming fast bandwidth you're used to from Wi-Fi 6 or 7, but at 5 kilometers, that's great for a ton of data applications such as farms, large industries, stuff that are spread across a decent distance and want the IP-based connectivity that Wi-Fi allows. Now, unfortunately for me, the bandwidth and power limits and the duty cycle limits are much, much lower here in Europe than they are in North America. And actually, North America is pretty unique in their high power limits in the 900 megahertz band, which I think is a big reason why HaLow hasn't taken off in the market. But Morse Micro has some brand new chipsets that should be able to get a bit better performance out of HaLow. They fully support the EU 868 megahertz band, so they at least function here. And I'm going to test and see how well they do. So if you're interested in long-range Wi-Fi, then come along on this adventure. So I've actually tested HaLow before in the US with the higher power limits, and I was able to get quite far. I was able to get about 10 megabits per second at about 500 meters, and I was able to get a signal up to maybe a kilometer or so. And I was pretty happy with that, especially considering I was going through trees and houses and stuff. But the power limits here are much worse, so let's take a look on the board at the power problem. So Wi-Fi, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, maybe 6 gigahertz, those channels, at least on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, are pretty universal around the world. Some countries and regions allow one extra channel on 2.4 gig or different power limits on 5 gig, but broadly speaking, those channels are always available. So if you make a product supporting Wi-Fi on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, you can be pretty reasonably sure that it'll be able to work everywhere around the world. And that is not true in the 900 and 800 megahertz bands. So here's a map of the ITU regions. So this is, broadly speaking, what unlicensed bands you have available depending on what region you're in. So in region 1, the unlicensed band at sub 1 gigahertz is at 868 megahertz. In region 2, in North and South America, it's in the 900 megahertz band. So this means that HaLow equipment operating here either has to have 2 different chipsets, 2 different sets of filters, something like that, or different hardware to operate in different regions of the world. And if you're a company making products, it's fine to have different firmware for US or non-US or whatever, but having different hardware is a bit of a higher burden to be able to sell. But it gets even worse. So in 900 megahertz in the US, we have about this much channel width, 26 megahertz of channel width. That's quite a lot. Here in the EU in region 1, we have 5 megahertz. That's about this much. But about half of that can only be used for narrowband 250 kilohertz or less channels. That means we can't do a 4 megahertz channel, we have to do a 2 megahertz channel like this. So already our theoretical bandwidth with HaLow has gone from 40 megabits with a, whatever channel width that is, down to 10 megabits on a good day. But it gets worse too. So this is what the power level would be in decibel milliwatts. So it's 1 watt EIRP in the US. In the EU here, we're under short-range device rules instead. So we get 25 milliwatts ERP, which is about 41 milliwatts EIRP. That's a graph this big. But this graph is actually logarithmic. So if I make it linear, it looks like it's real bad. We have very low power. And it gets even worse because we're not even allowed to transmit all the time. We're only allowed to transmit 10% of the time for access points or 2.5% for stations. So that means we could still get 10 megabits per second aggregate across our whole HaLow network, but each individual node can only send a maximum of about 250 kilobits per second before it runs into that duty cycle limit, which kind of sucks. So we're looking at, instead of having 40 megabits at 5 kilometers all day, we're looking at maybe getting 200 kilobits at 200 meters or something like that. And that's with the same exact radio hardware, just different regulatory limits. So the regulatory limits here in the EU really are pretty crippling. And that's why literally no one made HaLow equipment for the EU until now. So I've been asked in my comment section, why has HaLow not taken off like other standards like, say, Zigbee? And I think the real reason is because you can make a Zigbee device that works around the world. Even if the protocol's worse, it works at all around the world. If I make HaLow gadgets, they're only going to be viable in North America, where the spectrum and frequency limits make them viable. Here in the EU, it's just not as popular. So the limits have gone up a little bit for Wi-Fi recently. The duty cycle limit was raised from 1%, so now it's actually viable to use at all. And Morse Micro, who makes the chipsets for these guys, have a chipset that doesn't need different hardware to work in different regions. So this one radio should, in theory, without firmware limitations, work in different regions. Now I have the EU firmware limitation, so I am stuck at 868 megahertz. Not that I'd want to test at 900 megahertz anyway, because that's a cellular frequency here. I'd be in big trouble. But I'm going to test this guy today, and we're going to see how it works. So I got the HaLowLink2 here. Let's see what we got in the box. Of course, like any good Finn, I'm going to use my dual Puko set. Quick start guide, who needs instructions? Oh, this guy is way smaller than I thought he was. Nice. Okay, so I got the unit itself. So this is smaller than my hand. So it's got the Morse Micro logo. The back side, we've got two RJ45s, LAN and WAN, USB Type-C, 5 volt. And I'm assuming this is for the HaLow radio. We've also got a unique device password and a unique Wi-Fi password. So that's nice to see. There's a stand, so I guess we can prop it up if we want to. It sent me a whole set of power jacks. I got US, British, Australian, and Euro plug. That's what I need. Okay, so my antenna says 860 megahertz. So this must be a European one, to do 860. Or it's universal, they just have them printed differently. I don't know. This is a big antenna. This is way bigger than the size of the device. Cool. So, with both of these guys unboxed, I guess it's time to talk a bit about my test setup and what I'm even testing today. So this guy in my hand is the HaLowLink2. It's made by Morse Micro. Now Morse Micro is a chip company out of Australia, and they primarily design chipsets for Wi-Fi HaLow to be incorporated into other products. So this thing, the HaLowLink2, is pretty much sort of like a reference design for other manufacturers to make HaLow-based products. So in this little package here, it's got a MediaTek 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi SoC. So it's got a MIPS CPU, it's running OpenWRT. You're free to play with the OpenWRT part 2. It's got 2 gigabit ports, they're labeled LAN and WAN, but you can use both of them freely. It's also got USB data, and so this can act as a USB Ethernet as well, and this is a third port, so it's not shared with either of the other 2 ports. So we have 3 physical interfaces, LAN, WAN, USB, and we've got 2 radios. We've got the 2.4 gigahertz MediaTek radio, and we've got the Morse Micro Wi-Fi HaLow radio. And this chipset does support both bands, 868 and 900 megahertz, but this will be firmware locked to one of the 2 bands. In my case, this is an EU unit, so I'm locked to 868. Also, Morse Micro sent me 2 of these guys to test. So they're kind of showing off their new chipset family, the 8108, and so I'm testing them. This is a product you can buy, and it's not that expensive. I guess I'll have the price on the screen later. But they sent me these guys for review. They're not paying me to make this video, all that usual stuff. But I don't think, again, this is exactly designed to be an end product. It's more of a reference demonstration for HaLow technology and this generation of chipset. So test setup. So I got 2 of these guys, like I mentioned. They take USB power. So I've got them both hooked up to power banks, or I'm going to. So I'm going to go out into the fields of Finland with my friend Aron. He's going to take one at his car. I'm going to take one on foot, along with a power bank and my cell phone, and we're going to walk away from each other. And then, so each of these guys is a 2.4 gigahertz radio. We're each going to connect our phone to the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. These 2 guys will be connected to each other over HaLow. So we should be able to walk further than 2.4 gigahertz range would allow and still communicate with each other. So to test that actual communication, I'm going to use just a basic SIP phone app on both of our cell phones. since this runs OpenWRT, I can install packages on it as long as they're compiled for MIPS. And so I installed a basic SIP proxy, and that just handles the signaling traffic to set up a call. And then we're just going to do basic RTP between these, no encryption, just UDP audio frames. And so we're going to set that up with we're using the Opus codec, which uses about 40 to 50 kilobits per second. So it's not a super efficient codec like, say, codec 2 that can work down to like 2 kilobits or something. But it's within a reasonable range that it's a realistic application. So basically, I'm going to start walking further away, and we're going to see when we can't hear each other clearly anymore. So, I hope you can hear me well. I don't have my microphone today, but I'm here in front of a manure pile in this field here. And somewhere way back behind me is a car that's got the other one of these HaLow radios. And I guess I'll figure out on the map later how far away it is, but the call is still working out here. So based on where I ended up there by the manure pile, I was about 200 meters away from his car. So that's the distance we got, which again is not great. But he was able to hear me very clearly. I had the access point side in my hand, and I was not able to hear him well. So my transmissions with 10% duty cycle were getting through fine. The coding rate was low enough that he was dropping audio traffic with his 2.5% duty cycle. So I went into the CLI and I manually upped the duty cycle to 100%. So now we're limited by power, 25 milliwatts ERP. So with that, I was able to go about twice as far. So I made it about 400 meters. And again, I don't think I'm within range of anyone else using these frequencies to interfere with out in the middle of the field out here. Consider I'm only transmitting at 25 milliwatts. But 400 meters, and that tracks with what I've seen people in the US do. So I'm at about 14 times disadvantage compared to the US in terms of power level. So I'd expect about 14 times less range. And people in the US seem to be able to get about 5 kilometers or so, absolute best case out of these guys. So 400 meters in the EU tracks completely with the power level changes. Now as for actually setting these guys up, they run a version of OpenWRT that Morse Micro has built for this unit. It also has all the drivers required for the Morse Micro radio. That is sort of external to the MediaTek chip, so it's not tightly integrated like, say, like the MediaTek radio is natively. But there's still enough access to it through the console and through some of the logging in OpenWRT. So I was happy with that. It was super easy to get set up. Each of these guys comes out of the box configured for a Wi-Fi network on both 2.4 gigahertz and on HaLow. So I just had to log into one of them and configure it to use the other one's HaLow network as a client. And then they're paired up together, they're bridged. One of them is the DHCP server, all that basic stuff. No routing here, just a local network that's purely local. Now, of course, nothing's stopping me from just taking one of these and plugging it into my regular network and using this as a regular access point. But instead of being on the usual 2.45, 6 gigahertz, it's just an access point on 900 megahertz. So then clients can connect to it, they can bridge to it. If you buy devices that have HaLow built in, which is admittedly very few devices currently on the market that I could find, you can use this as a HaLow access point, just like any other Wi-Fi access point. And because this protocol is based on Wi-Fi and not something else, it inherits all of the same security and management features that Wi-Fi has. So over the HaLow network, I can use standard WPA3 encryption. You can even use WPA Enterprise if you want to. Although in this case, I was using WPA3 SAE with a pre-shared key, just random string of letters and numbers, that kind of stuff. And this supports all the normal features of Wi-Fi. So I can run IPv4, IPv6. It's just slower and longer range. And since you guys have been such good viewers, I'm going to tear this guy down. So I already took a look at this, and there's a sort of parting line here around this edge. So this surface and this surface are the same part. So we have a top shell and bottom shell. So just got to split those apart. I'm not sure if there's any screws. So I guess I'm going to pop the feet off on the back. Let's see if there's any screws under there. So popping this guy off, and he's got a screw in there, so that's tiny Phillips. So let's see about this one. No screw under that one, so probably just these two. And yeah, there we go. So we got two tiny Phillips. I use, I guess, the number 0. Pull these guys out. So now I got to pry this apart. So I guess we'll switch back to flat driver there. So we have an edge here that goes up and around. So just kind of shove that in. Come on. That one's kind of tight. Not too hard. Pop off. There we go. Okay. Got lid off. So in here we got the circuit board, and it is very covered by this heatsink here. So I guess I'll have to pull that off to see what's going on. So now can I remove the board without removing the RF connector? So I can pull the board down and slide it out. I guess I'll flip it over so we don't tangle up that wire. So now I got this. These are the back sides of screws. So the screws must be on this side. And oh, we got another heatsink here. Looks like we got 3 Phillips. So let's switch back to number 0. Pull these guys out. And what do we have under here? Come on. You just have an RF shield. So we get 2 RF shields here. Not sure what's under them, but something's under them. This chip here is probably like USB power delivery or something like that. It's got a little crystal next to it, but it's on the back of the USB chip. I guess it could be a USB Ethernet. So flipping over to this side, I should be able to pull this off now. So it's a little bit tighter. And we again just have a big RF shield. So these guys are the 2 RJ45s. We have magnetics here for the Ethernet capacitors, so power supply components here. This must be a debugging header, so it's a 10-pin. I guess you guys could look that up and see what it is. This, I think, is the Morse Micro chip itself. And it does, in fact, say on it, if you can see it, MM8108. So that's the Morse Micro chip. Oh, I bet this is the pinout of that connector. So ground TDO, TMS, reset, debug, V2D, TDI, TCK, reset, debug. So this looks like it has a serial port and JTAG, and power and ground. And I think that is for the Morse Micro chip and not the MediaTek chip. Because it looks like all those traces are going there. So if you need JTAG on the MediaTek chip, you've got a pinout for that. And so that's pretty much what we got on the inside. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks to Morse Micro for letting me take a look at these guys. I had a lot of fun with them. Even though the power limits are really quite low here, I had a great time going out with Orange to the middle of the field and just driving around for a little bit in dirt roads. That's always fun. I wish the EU would raise their power limits like the US has. I don't think there's anything else operating in this band. So cellular networks are nearby, but that's the same as in the US case. They're in 800 megahertz in the US. So we've just switched them in Europe. So I'm not sure what the motivation is for keeping the power limit so low here. Now LoRa also operates in this band. LoRa is a very low bandwidth solution, so it can travel much further, but its bandwidth is measured in bits per second, even hundreds of bits per second, as well as this is managed in the hundreds of kilobits. So that's a pretty serious advantage for this over LoRa. Other things that can operate at this kind of range, maybe 802.15.4. So normally we think of 802.15.4 as operating in 2.4 gigahertz for Zigbee and Thread. But 6-low PAN can also operate at 900 megahertz. I guess Thread technically could too, it's just not officially standardized to run 900 megahertz, 868. But that is one of the bands that 802.15.4 is designed for, so that could work. There's just not as much stuff happening on 868 here in Europe because the regulatory domain is sort of preventing it. So it'd be nice if they would open up low frequency, because low frequency is so great for long propagation. We have so many farms here in Finland, I'm sure they'd be happy to be able to get some data management or stuff across their whole scale without having to resort to 4G, 5G, even though 4G is super cheap here. So maybe that's what they end up doing. So I guess that's all I got today. My look at the Morse Micro 8108 HaLow chipset, the HaLowLink2 reference design from Morse Micro. I had a fun time with it. I do really wish the power limits could be higher in the EU, and I think that's why HaLow hasn't taken off like it did in the US. So in the US, my testing of HaLow was that the range is absolutely fantastic, the bandwidth's not that great, so I don't think a lot of people are going to flock to it as the new home Wi-Fi and congest the band. But if you have a need to send data at the scale of like your whole property as opposed to just within your house, I think 900 megahertz is a fantastic frequency for that, if only we had more access to it here. And since it's so lopsided on what our standards are across the world, I think that's why we don't have more products that are taking advantage of it like these. So now this, at least we can have a chip that's one physical design across the world without different filters like we used to need. but the range is still not there with the EU power limits. So that's unfortunate, but that's what I got here today. If you want to chat with me more, Discord server, link down below. If you want to help support the channel, you can buy a t-shirt from me, my Ko-fi down below for that. Free shipping for everyone in the US right now. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next adventure.